About 3,700 meters above sea level, the West Buttress wrote, Denali. On the 2nd of June, 2025, Alex Chiu is skiing down a section that most climbers pass without a single thought about danger. He's an experienced instructor who taught others the technique of self-arrest, and he himself admitted just 2 weeks before this day that his skills weren't what they used to be. Behind him is a year of longing for the mountains, spent in a Brooklyn office. Ahead is Squirrel Point, where a snowy slope imperceptibly gives way to a 900-meter drop. Two friends watch him fall and hear nothing in return. What makes a person who recognized his own limits go back to a mountain that exceeds those limits? And at what point does a deferred dream stop being a dream and become a trap? Brooklyn, New York, early 80s. In one of those neighborhoods with a 718 area code, Alex Chiu is growing up, the son of Chinese immigrants, a regular city kid. Concrete, asphalt, storefronts, the subway. Nothing that even remotely resembles mountains. Little is known about his childhood. Later, he'd describe himself as a Chinese kid from Brooklyn, and it would sound less like a description and more like a starting point. This is where I'm from. This is what I wasn't going to be my whole life. Chiu chose the tech path. He completed an intensive software development program at Flatiron School, one of those New York boot camps where they teach you to code from scratch in a matter of months. This wasn't a traditional university with 4 years of lectures. It was a pipeline. Walk in a beginner, walk out an engineer. Chiu walked out a software engineer and almost immediately found a job that would take him to the other side of America. Boeing, Seattle, Washington State. The country's largest aerospace corporation hired him as a software engineer, and Chiu moved from a city where the horizon was the rooftops of neighboring buildings to a city where any elevated spot offered views of the snow-covered Cascade Range. Mount Rainier, 4,500 meters of icy volcano, loomed to the south on clear days like a reminder that the world was arranged differently than it seemed from Brooklyn. Seattle is a strange city for someone who grew up surrounded by concrete. Here, people don't head to a bar after work, they hit the trail. Here, office talk about weekends in the Cascades is as casual as restaurant talk in New York. Here, you can pick up ice climbing gear on your way to the grocery store. Chiu landed in an environment where mountains weren't exotic or heroic. They were just part of normal life. He didn't yet know that Seattle would change him completely, that in a few years he'd divide his own biography into 2 parts, before and after, that the 718 in his Instagram handle would be the only thing connecting him to his former self. For now, he was just a programmer who relocated for work to a city where glaciers were visible from the office window. Glaciers through the window is one thing. Standing on a glacier is something else entirely. Chiu took that step when he signed up for the basic mountaineering course at BOE Alps, the Boeing Employees Alpine Society, a club that's existed since 1963 and enrolls a new group of aspiring climbers every spring. The course is serious. Several months of theory and practice, ascents on Cascade peaks, and a final graduation climb, after which you're either a mountaineer or you realize this isn't for you. For Chiu, it turned out to be something far bigger than a new athletic skill. He'd later described the effect of the course in a single formula, B, C, and AC, before climbing and after climbing. As if his entire previous life, Brooklyn, code, the office, had been nothing but preparation for the moment he first kicked crampons into ice and realized this was where he truly belonged. The BOEA Alps course is set up so that you don't just learn to move through mountains. You learn to trust people you've never met before. 12 people from different corners of the country, with different experience and different fears, spend 4 months training to hold each other on a rope, self-arrest with an ice axe on an icy slope, crossing crevasses, working in a rope team where your reaction determines whether your partner falls into the void. Chiu, who by his own admission had never stepped off a city sidewalk before Seattle, learned all of this from scratch. And a shift happened. Not just a new hobby, not just a weekend sport, but a complete reassembly of identity. A guy who defined himself through his neighborhood, his area code, and his profession suddenly discovered he could define himself through a mountain, through a rope team, through the people he climbed with on the same line. Mountaineering gave him more than adrenaline and beautiful views. It gave him a community and a new way to answer the question, who are you? Chiu didn't stop at the graduation climb. The course ended, but the mountains didn't. The mountains didn't end. They became a schedule, Monday through Friday, Boeing office, lines of code, meetings. Friday evening, backpack, ice axe, crampons in the trunk, and east toward the Cascades. This rhythm quickly evolved from a habit into a lifestyle, and then into the only way of existing that Chiu was willing to call real. The Cascades are the perfect training ground for anyone who wants to improve fast. Volcanic summits reaching 4,000 to 5,000 meters, glaciers, rock roots, couloirs filled with snow that can be soft in the morning and icy by noon, all of it a couple hours' drive from the city. Chiu took advantage of this every weekend. Ice climbing, rock climbing, ski mountaineering. He mastered everything Washington's mountains had to offer, never limiting himself to a single discipline. Versatility became his style, not a specialist in one type, but someone who could do a bit of everything and feel confident anywhere. His skills grew noticeably. The basic student who'd first strapped on crampons 2 years earlier started tackling routes that Bowie Alps reserved for experienced members only. The club noticed his progress and began involving him in organizing ascents. Chiu moved from the ranks of those who are led to the ranks of those who lead. He documented it on Instagram. He described himself in a long list: storyteller, traveler, diver, rock climber, mountaineer, marathon runner, snowboarder, skier, photographer. The list read like the resume of someone who tries everything, but those who'd climbed with him knew that mountains came first. Everything else was background noise. He'd write about it briefly and precisely. I got so good at what I do that I started teaching others, and that turned out to be even more rewarding. The transition from student to teacher happened naturally, almost imperceptibly. But it was this shift that changed his role in the community and the way he thought about mountains. Teaching others is no longer about your own summit. It's about someone else's fear on an icy slope, someone else's hands gripping an ice axe for the first time, someone else's eyes when a person who's never seen a glacier up close realizes they're about to walk across one. Chiu discovered that this side of mountaineering gave him no less than the ascents themselves. He became a volunteer instructor for Bowie Alps. He taught basic mountaineering, ice climbing, rock climbing, the full set of skills he'd once learned from scratch himself. The pandemic shut the course down for 2 years, and when the club finally brought classes back in 2022, it was Chiu who led the relaunch. The graduation climb took place on Mount Rainier, 4,392 meters of icy volcano, a serious mountain even for seasoned climbers. Chiu led a group of beginners up there. At club meetings in Seattle, he gave talks about the high mountains, presentations with titles like Adventures, Laughs, and Life Lessons in the High Mountains. Newcomers who just signed up for the course listened to his stories and thought, "What have I gotten myself into?" That's exactly how it works, through a blend of excitement and mild terror. Chiu understood this mechanism and used it deliberately. He stated his teaching philosophy plainly. When students look at a summit, I want to say, "You see that? I'm your instructor. I can show you how to get up there." There's a bit of selfishness in it, he admitted, but there's selflessness too. He'd found enormous joy and wanted to share it. The sound of boots being kicked into the snow as a group climbed single file toward the summit was like music to him. Chiu's friend James Lee would later say that Alex introduced countless people to mountaineering and spent every weekend in the mountains or on the slopes. Bowie Alps would call him a dedicated instructor who inspired countless students and rope partners. For the club, he was no longer just a member. He was the face, the voice, the person through whom beginners passed on their way to their first summit. Teaching became woven into his identity as deeply as the climbs themselves. Chiu wasn't just a mountaineer, he was the one who made mountaineers out of others. But the one who made mountaineers out of others eventually noticed he was starting to step back himself. It didn't happen suddenly, not after a specific fall, not after someone else's death on a route, not after one bad day. It was a slow accumulation, a body that took a little longer to recover than before. Risks that once seemed acceptable now prompting a pause before a decision. The realization that the gap between what you could do a year ago and what you can do now was no longer abstract but a concrete number that could mean the difference between life and death. By 2023, Chiu had essentially stopped climbing major peaks. The pandemic had already broken his mountain rhythm long before. Regular trips ceased. The Bowie Alps course was canceled twice. Whole seasons passed him by. But it wasn't just about COVID. It was that Chiu had begun honestly measuring the distance between his ambitions and his current condition. He'd later write about it directly. Tired of pushing my body to the limits, knowing the consequences of a mistake could be high with a deteriorating skill level. This is a rare moment of clarity for a mountaineer. Most don't stop until the mountain stops them. Chiu stopped on his own, consciously, deliberately, without any external push. The decision took shape as action. He moved back to Brooklyn, closer to family, to his brother Kevin, to the neighborhood where he grew up. He called it a fresh start, a phrase that carried not just hope, but also an attempt to convince himself this wasn't a retreat, but a choice. His work changed too. Chiu left Boeing and joined the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, as an aviation engineer. Different city, different office, different rhythm. The Cascades outside the window were replaced by Brooklyn rooftops. The ice axe and crampons went into a box in the closet. Seattle's mountain life stayed behind. But what the mountains had given Chiu over those years, identity, community, the feeling of pushing up against the edge of what's possible, didn't disappear with the move. It simply sank beneath the surface and waited and reminded him of itself every Saturday. Brooklyn is set up so you can live for years without remembering mountains exist. But Chiu couldn't. His new life looked right. A stable job at the FAA, an office, a desk, a screen, a predictable schedule. Saturday mornings meant long runs through Brooklyn streets, the only remnant of his former physical life. Marathon distance, numbers he still kept in his Instagram profile, as if they proved the body still worked. But after the runs, the same thing happened every time. Chiu would walk into gear shops, REI, the North Face, Arc'teryx, not to buy, to look. He'd touch jackets he didn't need, study backpacks he had nowhere to carry, stand in front of displays with photos of snow-capped peaks and stare at them the way a person stares at photographs from a past life. He'd write about it himself with disarming honesty. I had nothing to buy. I just wanted to see the pictures of what I used to do, of who I used to be. A year passed in this gap between two versions of himself. One was a Brooklyn engineer who'd made the sensible decision to stop. The other was a man who felt like the best version of himself in the mountains. Smart, witty, passionate, brave, his own words. Not someone else's assessment, not a compliment from a rope partner, but how he felt at altitude, and something no Brooklyn sidewalk could replicate. Nostalgia is the wrong word for what Chiu was going through. Nostalgia is a warm feeling about something gone. What he described was more like phantom pain. Part of you has been cut away, but you keep feeling it. You know you made the right decision, and at the same time, you know you've lost something irreplaceable. It was in this state, caught between reason and longing, that an opportunity appeared and shattered the fragile balance. Two old friends from the West Coast, climbers Chiu had gone into the mountains with during his Seattle years, were heading to Denali, and they invited him along. Denali, 6,190 meters, the highest point in North America. A mountain that stands in the middle of Alaska like a separate planet, massive, icy, with a vertical rise from base to summit greater than Everest's. For any mountaineer on the continent, it's the ultimate goal. For Chiu, it was the dream he'd shelved when he moved back to Brooklyn. The friend's invitation hit him right where it hurt. A year of longing for the mountains, a year of Saturday visits to gear shops, a year of phantom pain. And now, here was a concrete plan, a concrete date, a concrete mountain. Not some vague, I'll go back someday, but a plane ticket to Alaska. On the 19th of May, 2025, the day before his flight, Chiu published a long post on Instagram. It would be the last of his life. The text reads like a manifesto from a man who's made a decision and wants to explain it, not to others, but to himself. He writes about the arc of every mountaineer. You sharpen your skills, you practice nonstop until you hit a plateau, because easy routes are boring and hard ones can kill you. You search for something in between, but even that carries serious risk. This isn't romance or bravado. It's the sober analysis of someone who spent more than 10 years in the mountains and understands how decisions get made at altitude. Then comes an honest confession. By 2023, he'd all but quit the mountains. He was tired of pushing his body to the limit. He knew his skills had faded and the price of a mistake had gone up. And yet, here he was, pack on his back, ready to fly to Alaska. Because he didn't want to find out what happens to a dream deferred. Dream deferred, words from a poem by Langston Hughes, a poet from Harlem, who asked, "What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or does it explode?" Chiu calls Denali the third highest peak in the world, an inaccuracy that changes nothing about the essence of the post. The essence is in the last line. "Tomorrow, I'm getting on a plane to Alaska." A man who knows the price of risk, who described his own fading skills, who explained why he stopped, chooses the mountain. He chooses, and finds himself on it by late May, right in the heart of the season. Denali greets Chiu's group the way it greets everyone, with icy wind, a white expanse with no landmarks, and the sensation that civilization isn't just far away, but in another dimension. Around 500 people are on the mountain at the same time. The 2025 season is ramping up, with a total of 936 climbers registered. But 500 people on a mountain, this scale isn't a crowd. They're dots on an endless white canvas, scattered across camps, strung along the route across kilometers of vertical. The West Buttress route is the path chosen by more than 90% of climbers. Its reputation as the least technical route on Denali creates a deceptive sense of accessibility. In reality, it means glacial crevasses hiding beneath thin snow bridges, steep icy sections where crampons have to bite on the first strike, exposed ridges open to winds that, on Denali, can turn a clear day into a whiteout within an hour, temperatures plunging to -40, weather that shifts faster than a group can make a decision. Since 1980, at least 14 people have died in falls on the upper section of the West Buttress. In 2010, at Squirrel Point, a specific spot on the route at roughly 12,000 feet, a French climber fell. He too was unroped. His body was never found. In 2024, a Japanese climber died on the same route. The mountain doesn't distinguish between beginners and veterans, between the cautious and the reckless. It simply doesn't forgive the moment you lose control in the wrong place. Chiu's group is 3 people, 2 old friends from the West Coast, and him. The expedition style is ski mountaineering, ascent and descent on skis, with sleds for hauling gear and supplies. This isn't a commercial expedition with guides and porters. It's a self-sufficient team where everyone is responsible for themselves and for their partners. What happens on the mountain in the final days of May, how many days they spend acclimatizing, how far they advance, what difficulties they encounter, is unknown. Park spokesperson Amber Smigiel would later tell reporters a sentence that remains the only answer to the central question. "We still don't know whether they attempted the summit, whether they reached it. All we know is that he was descending. He was descending." That's the only thing established with certainty. On the 2nd of June, 2025, Chiu's group is at approximately 3,660 meters, 12,000 feet above sea level. The area between the point climbers call Lunch Rocks and Motorcycle Hill, above Camp 2 at 11,200 feet. Between these 2 landmarks lies a short stretch of route that looks insignificant on a map. On the ground, it looks very different. Squirrel Point, a snowy, sometimes icy slope that climbs 500 feet to a ridge, and on the other side drops away vertically. 900 meters of rock, seracs, and exposed ice down to the Peters Glacier, lying half a mile below. The Mount McKinley Climber's Handbook describes this section in one sentence worth remembering. Anything that falls off a pack or sled here will come to rest 2,000 feet lower. That's not a metaphor. Chiu is descending on skis. Behind him, loaded sleds are being towed, standard practice in ski mountaineering on Denali, but on a steep descent, the sleds pick up their own speed, swinging side to side, capable of jerking the skier off balance at any moment. He isn't roped to his partners. On this section of the West Buttress, going unroped is common. Most climbers pass through it on their own, relying on their legs and their ice axe. Shortly before, another group of skiers overtook Chiu's team on the descent towards Squirrel Point. Someone passes this section faster, someone slower, and the very fact that others are skiing ahead can create a sense that the slope is safe. But safety here isn't measured by whether you fall. It's measured by what happens if you do. A few hundred feet higher is the gentle ridge near Lunch Rocks, where a fall means nothing more than a tumble into soft snow. A few hundred feet lower is Motorcycle Hill, where the slope flattens out and leads toward camp. But right here, on this short stretch, the slope tilts toward the drop-off. Snow conditions can change within hours, soft in the morning, icy by noon, loose again by evening. What state the snow was in when Chiu's skis crossed Squirrel Point, nobody knows. Nobody knows what happened in the next second. Whether he lost his balance from a jerk of the sleds, whether his ski hit a patch of ice beneath a thin layer of snow, whether an edge caught on hard crust, or whether he simply drifted half a meter toward the drop, to where the slope stops being a slope and becomes a void. The only thing recorded is this: 2 of Chiu's partners saw him fall, and saw him disappear. 900 meters, rock, seracs, exposed ice, and below, the Peters Glacier lying at the bottom of the gorge like a cold white plain that no trail leads to. A fall from that height leaves no options. But the partners do what a person standing on the edge can do. They descend toward the drop as far as safety allows. They call out. They listen. No sound, no movement, just wind and emptiness below. The decision they make next is the only possible one, and probably the hardest of their lives. They turn around and begin the descent along the West Buttress route. From Squirrel Point to the lower camps is a long way down. They descend to report to the rangers what they saw. By Tuesday, both are at Camp 1, where the ranger team provides assistance. Both are in shock, but the mountain won't allow a search to begin. Wind picks up, snow falls. The temperature near Camp 1 drops to -18. Helicopters from Talkeetna can't get airborne. Ground teams can't approach the north side of the range. All of Tuesday, the 3rd of June, Denali remains locked down. No rescuer can reach the Peters Glacier. Chiu's body lies at the base of a 900-meter wall, and no one can get to it. Only on the morning of the 4th of June does the weather on the north side of the Alaska Range finally relent. 2 rangers from Talkeetna go up by helicopter and begin an aerial search. The body is found at the base of the slope, on the Peters Glacier, exactly where the logic of the fall pointed, and where the guidebook, written long before this day, said it would be. No ice axe is found with the body. It may have been lost during the fall, may have been stowed in a backpack, may have been swapped for ski poles with self-arrest tips, known as whippets. No one knows. The body is transported to Denali National Park headquarters and then turned over to the Alaska State Medical Examiner. Alex Chiu is 41 years old. He is the first fatality of the 2025 season on Denali. The first fatality of the season, but far from the first time Squirrel Point has sent someone down to the Peters Glacier. And every time it happens, the same question comes up. Why? What exactly went wrong in that specific moment, on that specific stretch of slope? The National Park Service's official account is dry, death resulting from a fall while skiing in the Squirrel Point area. Unroped. The precise cause of the loss of control has not been determined. The investigation continues, but the space between he fell and why he fell fills not with facts, but with theories, and none of them is confirmed. First theory, skills. Chiu himself wrote about this 2 weeks before his death. A deteriorating skill level, a year without serious climbing, a body that works at a desk, not on a slope. Ski skills don't disappear entirely, like riding a bike. You remember how it's done. But precision, reaction time, the feel of an edge on different snow, all of that is calibrated through practice. A year without skiing on steep slopes is a year without calibration. Second theory, the sleds. On a steep descent, loaded sleds pick up speed and start living a life of their own, swinging side to side, overtaking the skier, jerking in unpredictable directions. If the sled's yanked at the wrong moment, a fraction of a second, and you've already lost control. Third theory, the snow. Craig Medred, an Alaska journalist who once slipped on Squirrel Point himself and barely stopped his slide with an ice axe, describes this spot as a place where surface conditions are unpredictable, soft snow in the morning and icy crust by noon. If Chiu hit a patch of hardpack or bare ice, the chances of self-arrest drop sharply. And finally, the ice axe. Was it in his hands? Was it stowed in his pack? Did Chiu use ski poles with self-arrest tips, so-called whippets, instead? None of the search team members know. No ice axe was found with the body, but in a fall from that height, you can lose everything. A man who spent years teaching others the technique of self-arrest on an icy slope died on a slope where that technique could have saved his life. Whether he even got a chance to try will remain unanswered. There will be no answer, but the questions spread fast. On the 5th of June, the National Park Service publishes an official press release, and within 24 hours, the story of Alex Chiu breaks out of Alaska's local news. The New York Times, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, Vice, the biggest American outlets pick up a story that has everything the public notices: a young mountaineer, a final Instagram post, quoting Langston Hughes, a return to the mountains after a long break, a fall witnessed by friends, 2 days of bad weather, and a body on a glacier. It's the post from the 19th of May that becomes the center of the media narrative. The phrase "dream deferred" spreads across headlines as a ready-made story. A man dreamed, a man came back, a man died. Journalists quote his words about not wanting to know what happens to a dream you keep putting off, and those words, written 2 weeks before his death, now sound as though he knew. In Seattle, the first to respond are those who climbed with him. Bowie Alps publishes an obituary on Facebook, calling Chiu a vibrant and dedicated member of the extended outdoor family, a person whose love for the mountains, spirit of adventure, and kindness touched many. For a club where he grew from a beginner into an instructor, this isn't an abstract loss. It's an empty chair at the next meeting, a voice that will never again tell a story to an audience of newcomers. In Alaska, Craig Medred, a veteran journalist who has spent decades writing about mountains and those they take, publishes an in-depth analytical piece under the headline, "Beautiful and Deadly." Medred doesn't rehash the press release. He describes his own experience of falling on Squirrel Point, breaks down the possible factors, the sleds, the snow, the skills, and ends with a thought that sounds not like consolation, but like a statement of fact. Living, doing what you love, is far better than dying doing what you love. Chiu's friends launch a fundraiser on GoFundMe for funeral expenses and donations to organizations tied to mountaineering, running, and snowboarding. Memorial services are held in both cities he called home. In Seattle, among those he climbed with in the Cascades. In New York, among those he returned to when he decided to stop. 2 cities, 2 versions of one life, and between them, a mountain in Alaska that belongs to neither. The names of Chiu's 2 partners have never been revealed. Their statements have not been published. Their silence isn't the only thing that lingers after this story. The mountain itself is silent too. Squirrel Point isn't the steepest section of Denali, not the highest, not the most technically demanding. That's the trap. You don't fall off a cliff, you slide toward one, and by the time you realize you can't stop, there's nowhere left to stop. Roughly 125 people have died on Denali since 1932, out of 24,000 successful ascents. Statistics that let you say the odds are in your favor, and at the same time prove that the mountain takes lives on a regular basis. After Chiu's death, no changes to rules or regulations were recorded. Squirrel Point wasn't fenced off, wasn't closed, wasn't given additional warnings. It remains part of the route, the same as yesterday, the same as it will be tomorrow. A place that most people pass without trouble, and that once every few years reminds everyone that without trouble isn't a guarantee. It's luck. Luck that Alex Chiu ran out of on the 2nd of June. The main open question is whether the group reached the summit of Denali before the descent. The Park Service doesn't know. The partners haven't given public statements. Perhaps Chiu stood on the highest point of North America and saw what he'd flown from Brooklyn to see. Perhaps the group turned back without reaching the top. That difference will likely remain a blank space forever. And in that blank space lies the central paradox of Alex Chiu's story. A man who divided his life into before climbing and after, who taught beginners safety on icy slopes, who stopped on his own because he'd soberly assessed his limits, who spent a year wandering through gear shops, aching for the mountains, and who, when the mountains called again, said yes, knowing everything he knew. His last public words were about not wanting to find out what happens to a dream deferred. Langston Hughes left the answer to that question open. So did Alex Chiu.